Chapter 8. Even death won't stop me. I had the strangest dream. Jacob and I were racing toward chaos, each trying to be the first to reach him. Then, suddenly, a bright white light appeared in front of us. Both of us reached for it as we ran, trying to snatch it and harness its power. But then, just before we reached chaos, Jacob stopped and gave me a hard shove forward, propelling me toward that shining light. I used his push and tried to grab it, but just when my fingers touched it, Chaos snatched it with the same fist he had then used to punch me in the face, knocking me backward. I fell onto my back and went straight through the floor, falling indefinitely into a sea of swirling purples and blacks. I watched Jacob start his battle with Chaos, going blow for blow against the old god, but then I turned away, facing the floor as I continued to fall. I felt like I was falling for eternity, but eventually I reached a new floor, made entirely of a viscous purple goo. I landed in it and bounced with an odd jiggly motion, my body flowing as it gyrated. I didn't pull myself out of it. I could feel it, slowly pulling me in. As I sank through the sticky goo, I came face to face with my own reflection. He looked just like me, but younger, happier. He was smiling, and it reminded me that I hadn't smiled like that in a long time. I took in a deep breath, and as I exhaled, I woke up. I jumped with a start at finding myself awake in a bed in a cluttered but homey room, filled to the brim with knickknacks, tapestries, and sewing materials. It kind of reminded me of my mom's house. I found myself surprised that the numerous blankets laid over me were so heavy that they were literally trapping my arms to my sides, and I needed to struggle to get free. But once I got one arm free, I was able to flip the blankets off myself and start getting up. I froze when my heartbeat hurt so badly that I was worried that I was about to have a heart attack, and then I doubled over when I felt it once more, clutching at my chest with both hands. I was anxious and gasping for breath, but when I settled down and the pain subsided, I looked to my chest and felt relief wash over me when I saw that I'd healed completely while I was asleep. The only mark remaining on my chest were some stitches, running up a now nearly invisible scar that faded away eventually. I wasn't sure where I was or where I should go, but I knew I didn't want to hang around there. I got out of bed and started toward the door, but when I grabbed the handle and tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. Locked? I asked myself quietly, trying to remember where I had been before all of this. But I was surprised to hear someone on the other side of the door ask herself, "What? But I didn't lock this." The voice didn't sound familiar. With a gulp, I released the handle and stepped back from the door, only to hear the jingling of keys from outside. I reached for my blade, only to find it missing from my hip as I heard the key enter the lock and watched the handle turn. An old lady opened the door and looked inside, surprised to see me standing upright, but with a somewhat queer look on her face. "Did you lock the door?" she asked with confusion. "No, I think we both tried to open it at the same time," I explained with a sigh of relief. "Oh, all right then. How are you feeling?" the kindly old woman asked. She turned around and grabbed a large bowl of soup on a tray with some bread she had set down behind her. "I'll be okay, but where am I? Who are you?" I asked as she entered. She gestured for me to lay back in bed, but didn't persist when I disobeyed. "I'm Hugh, and you're in the palace of the Monkey King. You should take it easy, young man. You nearly died out there. If Ren hadn't found you and brought you to me, I doubt you would have ever survived," she explained. Hugh was a hunched-over old woman with a face so wrinkled it always looked like she had her eyes closed. Her hair had gone white, and she wore an eloquent black robe-like dress with a red waist-wrap. I took a moment to take in her words and took the seat on the bed as she patted it gently beside her. She started trying to feed me the large bowl of soup, so I took it from her. The second the scent hit my nose, my mouth started watering. It smelled salty and savory, but sweet and delicious. It was some kind of pork and rice soup, and I ate the whole thing and drank the broth before devouring the crusty bread she brought with it. She just sat patiently and waited for me, seeming pleased that I enjoyed the meal. When I finished, I wiped off my mouth and gathered my thoughts. Thank you so much. I was starving. So Ren found me and brought me back here, right? Does that make you Ren's mother, or grandmother, or... I asked, hoping she would fill in the blank. "I'm her grandmother, yes. My daughter Hao passed away some time ago," she said sadly. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize," I expressed, feeling uncomfortable. "It's all right. We don't really like to talk about it much. Either way, I'm glad you're already feeling better. I'll let Ren know that it's all right to come and see you now, but I really think you should get some more rest." "I'd like to, but I just don't have time for that right now," I said, getting back to my feet. Hugh eyed me funny before smiling to herself and shaking her head. "You kids these days really don't take anything easy, do you?" she asked, seeming like she was asking herself. I answered anyway, though, saying firmly, "I won't speak for anyone else, but the easy way isn't usually the path I find myself on." She looked back to me, a look of recognition in her nearly covered eyes. That look made it all come rushing back to me. The events of the day, Sun going off to fight the Ming Song family, Zhao and the puppy, Towdy and the Book of Souls, all of it hit me like a ton of bricks. I looked back to Hugh and asked her, "Ma'am, Sun said I should ask you to read my mind and help me unlock my aura transformation. Is that something you think you could help with? I really need more power, as soon as possible." "Aura transformation? I suppose I do know a little about that. But are you sure you want me to read your mind? I need to see everything, and I mean everything. You won't be able to hide your secrets from me," she explained seriously. I only nodded. "Well, if you're sure, I'll try," she agreed. With that, she extended a hand and reached out for me. I expected her to put her palm on my head or something like that, but instead she merely placed it on my shoulder. I could feel her presence reaching within me, but I was taken aback when she said, "Please try to relax. You're too on guard." It took me a second to register what she said, but then I closed my eyes and started breathing deeply, focused only on my breath. I felt her spirit in my mind, wandering my memories like they were an art gallery to be observed. Each one she viewed flashed before my eyes, and I struggled to remain meditative, especially when my most painful memories were seen by her. Still, I barely managed to stay composed and relaxed enough for her to try and help me. When she was finally done, she took a deep sigh of relief, seeming as though my memories might have caused her some anxiety as well. "You've lived a hard life, young man," she said sadly. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. A quiet, "yeah," was all I could muster in reply. She gently patted my shoulder before removing her hand from it, but then she looked away like she was lost in thought. After a few moments, she said, "You seem like a very direct and decisive person, so I imagine the aura transformation that would bring you the most use would be a raw, yellow form. Since they rely on aspects of a person's personality, the ability is strengthened greatly when the user is in an emotional state that suits the form." I was a bit overwhelmed by what she was saying, so I just asked, "Well, what's that mean, then?" She seemed a bit bemused, but smiled at me and said, "It means there's something in your mind holding you back from being your most direct self, something you subconsciously wish to overcome." She paused and waited for me to respond, but I was still processing that information, so to help me along, she said, "Usually it's closer than you realize. Something you simply choose not to deal with instead of actually going through with what you truly wanted to do." "Well, those are common anyway." "Okay, but I don't understand what that means, or what I need to do," I replied. "You just need to listen to your heart," was a powerful reply. I took at least a few minutes mulling over what she told me, but I still didn't feel any closer to understanding. Eventually she said, "You know, aura transformations in demigods are rare. I'm surprised your friend was able to achieve one, but you shouldn't struggle to hold yourself to that standard." She was going to say more, but I interrupted her. "I don't have any choice. I need more power if I'm going to help Sun face the Ming Song family." "You should just leave them to him. I'm sure he won't need any help," Hugh said. "I don't know. That Ming Song woman was stronger than she's let on. I ran my sword right through her heart and it didn't even faze her," I explained. Hugh nodded. "Yes, I saw that in your memories. But you have to understand, Sun has been immortal for millennia. He knows how to deal with this sort of thing. I'm much more concerned about that monster Towdy and whatever it's doing to those poor townspeople from Dongview," she explained. "I'm worried about them both," I replied. "Me too," she agreed, taking a long, thoughtful pause. After a moment, she reached into her robe and pulled out a stitching needle. "Well, let's take those stitches out." I was a bit nervous, but it wasn't so bad. The hard part was really just the sitting still. When she finished, she examined her work before she nodded to herself and took the empty bowl from beside me, putting it back on her tray. Then she picked up the tray and got headed toward the door. On her way out, she said, "Please wait here for a little while. I'll send Ren in with your things and some clothes for you. Be careful out there. Oh, and try not to be so hard on yourself. We all make mistakes." And with that, she walked out the door, closing it behind her. I stood up and stretched myself out as I thought more about what she said, her words running through my mind again and again. Even so, I couldn't manage to think of anything that was making me a less direct person, so I didn't exactly come up with any ideas for how to transform. Eventually, my train of thought was interrupted by a knock on the door. "Come in," I replied. When the door opened, Ren stepped inside with a pile of clothes and my blade resting atop them. "Hey, how are you feeling?" Ren asked with a smile. She seemed pleased to see me all right. "I'll survive," I said, noticing she had more clothes with her than just my ruined cloak. I took my sword belt and secured it around my waist before placing my blade through one of the loops. "You were in pretty rough shape when I found you out there. I'm glad to see you're all right, she said distantly, seeming as though having seen me that way had pained her greatly. Your gran said if you hadn't brought me back I would have died, so I guess I owe you some thanks, I replied, starting to look through the clothes. She was about to say something, but the clothes sucked, so I asked, "What is this crap? Don't you guys have anything to wear in this place that won't make me look like some kind of noble or something?" Ren seemed a bit taken aback and offended. She crossed her arms and asked, "Are you kidding? This is some of our best stuff." I eyed her and she rolled her eyes and sighed before saying, "I guess I can take you to look at what we have." But then I spotted something I hadn't noticed before. The black robe she'd brought me hung just past my knees and would make a perfect coat if left open. So I grabbed a pair of white pants and pulled them on before throwing the robe over my arms and using my sword belt to secure the pants to my waist. Last, I tied a red waist wrap around everything to keep the robe from flowing behind me. "Ready?" Ren asked, seeming like she was tired of waiting. I nodded and she pumped her fists with excitement. "Great! So what's the plan?" "Ever heard of a place called Ordos?" I asked. "Yeah, of course I have," Ren said, seeming a bit confused why I was asking. "Apparently, that's where the Ming Song family lives. Your dad said he was headed there. I know your gran said it will be fine, but I can't shake the feeling that he needs my help," I explained. Ren seemed outright confused now, asking, "Really? Why's that?" "The people who've died since death has been nullified are decaying. Their bodies are transforming as their souls burn up what remains of their flesh and their bones, and becoming almost like zombies or the undead. But that Ming Song woman, I stabbed her right through the heart, but her wound closed up and she didn't seem to be rotting like the others," I explained. "So what does that mean?" Ren asked. "I guess we'll find out in Ordos."